the impact of music on development has been a very exciting piece of what I've learned and how I live. My newborn visits, I will always tell the moms and dads, please sing to your baby. And when you're listening to music, dance with your baby because their body will feel the rhythm. Listening to music, it helps a child to organize language in a different way. It's not a spoken language, but the contours of music, the volume, the patterns, the rhythms, their ears have to process all of those things as well. But nursery rhymes are, universal for a reason. Lullabies are universal for a reason.
We realize that it's not actually a distraction. If anything, it's like a propeller for their academic success also.
Exactly.
Today I'm joined by Dr. Lisa Wong, a pediatrician, an assistant professor at the Harvard Medical School, and a longtime contributor at the Longwood Symphony Orchestra. Dr. Lisa Wong works in the amalgamation of the arts and medicine. Over the course of the pandemic, she launched a program called the Boston Hope Program, which delivered music to patients and healthcare workers. Today, she's advancing the role of music in medicine, and that's exactly what she's covering through this podcast as well. I'm so excited for you to get insights on how her methods are, how she actually prescribes music to patients, and what children learn from it. Thank you so much, Dr. Wong, for agreeing to come onto the podcast. As soon as I found out that you were a pediatrician, it was so exciting to me because I think the space that you're also working with, along with being a pediatrician, is extremely unique and very, very exciting. So touching on to that space a little bit, because you practice the music because you play the violin and also practice as a pediatrician, how do you see the two kind of coming together in order to equip you with all that you know, in order to kind of help your clinical skills get better, perhaps?
Well, thanks for having me. And there's many different connections between music and healing, but music and education. And of course, as a pediatrician, just watching the impact of music on development has been a very exciting piece of what I've learned and how I live my life and choose what I want to do. Yeah. So I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old, so I don't think I remember not playing the piano. And I had there are 4 other siblings, and by the time we were 8 or 9, each of us was playing 2 instruments.
Wow.
So this was just sort of part of it. And for me, music was a way to express, and also we weren't sports kids, but we competed through our music. We competed with knowledge. We would test each other. We would play games of music with each other. And I also learned to be very curious and experiment with sound. So I was making attempts at learning different instruments very early on, and also making instruments and playing with sound. So all of that I brought with me to my pediatric practice. Before I decided to be a pediatrician, I think I was always interested in helping other kids, helping other people, and healing them in some way. I was fascinated with that, but not with the science of it, but just how people would get better with certain things that you did, and maybe engaged in the interest in their human emotions. So by the time I was in high school, my group of friends would go to visit a hospital that was nearby our school, and we would play music for the children there. And these were kids. I'm from the island of Hawaii, and this hospital, the Shriners Hospital, would bring kids from other Polynesian islands who didn't have as much health care. And so if they're born with congenital foot anomalies, they would bring them to the Shriners Hospital to have surgery. And then they would keep them till they're healed and then send them back.
Right.
And so these were children, this is not now in the 1970s. So the children, there's a lot of pain and loneliness and homesickness.
Yeah.
Their families couldn't come with them because it was too far, and they're very large families. So our coming once a week, we started to really see that the kids would look forward to it, and we were bringing ukuleles and recorders and things for them, and tambourines, things for them to play. And so by the time I left high school, I had seen the change in the light in the eyes of the children, that music could do. And so by the time I came to college, I was determined to be either a music therapist or a music educator or a pediatrician who played music. So something with all three pieces of the stool.
Yeah, and I think it's such a unique story that perhaps you've experienced so firsthand that by the time you got out of high school and entered college, it was so clear, like you knew that you wanted to combine pediatrics and combine music, which is very unknown but makes so much sense in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it really was seeing the light in the eyes of the kids and how excited they got and how they forgot their pain for a little while.
Yeah.
And they forgot their loneliness for a little while. And so that was what I was curious about and wanted to explore.
Once you entered pediatrics and you started that journey, it's a pretty unconventional route to take, right? To say that I'm going to prescribe music as a part of healing. But we absorb so much of our pain and so much of our feelings simply through the senses that we have. Would you be willing to share perhaps a story or something that you've seen, like maybe a patient who's been positively impacted by music firsthand?
There are lots of opportunities for that. I think we know from early on, even from birth, that children hear and feel rhythm. And so it's not a single story, but when I take care of kids who are newborns all the way till they graduate from college.
Yeah.
And so at my newborn visits, I will always tell the moms and dads, please sing to your baby. And when you're listening to music, dance with your baby because their body will feel the rhythm. And that kind of rhythm that they're feeling is being entrained into their bodies and teaching them even more about rhythm. And when I talk with medical students or my undergraduate students, I ask them, how many have seen a little baby and you turn on music and they automatically bob their heads? It's not something that's taught, it's something that's innate. And so knowing that, then it really helps us to help them to draw that out. So when I see, sometimes the moms and dads will say, well, I don't sing very well. And then I point out that they're the only audience, the baby has never heard anybody else sing, so they're the best singing they've ever heard. But it encourages them to it gives them another way of nurturing. And then when I see the babies, I will sing to them while I'm examining them. And over the years, I've had some patients come back. There was an 8-year-old who brought his clarinet and played during for his annual physical exam. He said, I brought you something. And he took out his clarinet and he played for me. And then he went on to be in the high school band and all of those things. So having music become part of the fabric of people's lives, I think that's one of the goals that I have.
Absolutely. And I think this is the most unique thing about pediatrics. Like what you said, you see them when they're babies, you see them when they're 8-year-olds, then they've gone into high school and they're going to go to college, and you're seeing them literally as much as their parents are seeing them in the beginning when they change so much.
Exactly. It really is a privilege to be a pediatrician. And I think you know this too. Because when you see a newborn, you don't know what their journey is going to be. But the families trust you and you trust the families to walk that journey together all the way till when they graduate. So they could get pneumonia at 2 weeks of age, 2 months of age, and 12 and 22. And those are all going to be completely different diseases. Absolutely. Even though it's maybe the same germ or the same exam, but in the child's life and the way their bodies respond, but also the way they respond emotionally, it's going to be different. So that's the fun of the journey, and also because you're dealing with caregivers for that young child, you really have more than just the baby as your patient. You have an entire family.
Absolutely. That's so beautifully put. And it's so true. It holds so true to what we practice and what we do as part of our day-to-day life.
And I'm lucky. I'm 38 years into the same practice now. So my babies have grown up and they're bringing me back their babies. So I have those two generations, plus often the grandmas come, who were my moms before, and now they're my grandmoms.
Yeah.
And so, it's such a privilege to be sort of basically living 40 years of somebody's lifetime together, more.
Yeah.
And just knowing the different journeys, and also being able to sort of help apply even to the parents knowledge of what their childhood path had been and how that relates to how they are as parents.
Yeah, honestly. And when we think about going back to music, on a very biological level, how does it support a newborn and then a child?
Oh, well, a lot of things. I mean, the more we know about development, the more we know about what happens to the brain when it hears music and when it processes music, the more convinced I am that this is the way to go, that everybody should engage in music in as many ways as they can. So listening to music, it helps a child to organize language in a different way. It's not a spoken language, but the contours of music, the volume, the patterns, the rhythms, their ears have to process all of those things as well. And my colleagues who are neuroscientists of music have determined that babies know dissonant harmonies versus consonant harmonies. They seem to prefer music that are consonant chords rather than dissonance, or they'll notice the difference even when they're teeny tiny. And if they're learning an instrument, then you have to coordinate so many parts of your body. Even babies who are just learning how to clap. Clapping is one of those milestones we always talk about. Like, can they clap? Can they clap in time to the music? Is another accomplishment.
Yeah.
Because they're hearing it, they're processing it, they're in training, and then they're telling their gross motor body to clap in time to the music, or off beats or whatever. You can challenge them to do different rhythms, and they have to figure out how to tell their brain that. And of course, it's so quickly automatic that they're not consciously doing that, but the more they practice that, the more they are learning different patterns, different variations, being comfortable with weird stuff, with weird rhythms, finding that certain rhythms and certain harmonies are hilarious, and so they're getting, I think, more opportunities to experience the senses than somebody who doesn't hear music or isn't mindful of what they're processing and what they're engaging in.
And in the newborn phase especially, we talk about creating a language-rich environment to further language development for a child. And I think music is one of the easiest things to do, because parents are often confused. They're like, how much can we talk to them? What do we talk to them about? How can we keep reading to them? It's not possible. But music is something that even parents enjoy. They like to sing along as well.
Even asking them to, when the baby's just little, 2 months, 4 months, to clap the baby's hands in time to the music, or move their legs in time to the music. And in some ways you're doing physical therapy with these babies. In other ways, you're also dancing with them, even before they're even standing up or sitting up. So all of those things, as well as the one-to-one engagement, the eye contact, and all of that. You're right. It just gives them a completely different way of engaging with their child that's enjoyable. And moving on from that, I mean, therapeutically, not just babies, but older people too find that doing any kind of therapy to music is more effective and more tolerable. If you're trying to have somebody do flexing and extending their arms to try for physical therapy, for example, if you're doing it to a beat and to a song, then you're automatically going to do it for as long as that song goes on. Correct. Without saying, oh my God, this is number 13, this is number 14, this is number 15, when is this going to end? But if you're doing it to the song and having fun, there's nothing wrong with that element, because it's a motivator, and you can get more accomplished.
And also, once they become children and when they start going to school, I think music also has the ability to teach them so much which their brain is capable of, which normal academics don't. The coordination, like what you were talking about earlier, the management of your timing when you have to play that instrument, the attention you need to give in 3 different areas. So it's activating and like almost lighting up parts of your brain which otherwise don't get exercised.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think back in the day they used to look for the one center of music in your brain, and they gave up on that because there's no single center. You're using different parts of your brain for different jobs that you have in listening to music, but even more so in playing music. Your rhythm section is your cerebellum, and we need it for walking, but we can use it for dancing, and we can use it for playing music in rhythm. And your fine motor, if you're asking your fingers to be very specific to play particular notes in a particular way, those are skills that you don't otherwise ask your fingers to do. You ask them to hold a pencil, or you ask them to type on a computer, but really purposefully playing music using your fingers in that way for a hard touch, a light touch, a staccato touch, a smooth touch, all of these things, you're really refining your skills that way. And the same with your larger muscles too. If you're a stringed instrument, you're bowing. The ones who are really fascinating to me are the ones who are in marching band. Like, how do you do that? Play your clarinet, remember the music, and walk in a way that you don't crash into everybody else in these patterns. But all of those challenges, I think, are great for the brain. And again, the neuroscientists will show us that people who are engaged in music in those ways, their brains actually look different. They've laid down thicker tracks that they can use for other things, which we all know. Those of us who are in music and then in science, or music in medicine, those same problem-solving skills and those same the refinement of using your fingers to play an instrument can also be used for doing surgery or for pipetting or doing scientific things, or both. And so any way that we can stimulate our brain and really train our brains. But I think the emotional side is the other thing you're talking about. It's so interesting to see. So I have 2 children. They're now grown up, and they started their music when they were little, and so I got to watch them learn their instruments, and now they're very proficient, and they also have other careers. But during that time, it's not an easy process. Music is hard. It's frustrating. It's annoying. It's regular. It's like you practice your violin and you brush your teeth. I mean, these are the things you do every day.
It's so much discipline.
It's a lot of discipline, and they learn from that discipline. And when you're little, you'll push back against that discipline. But as you push back, that struggle, you learn something from that. Or my son used to get super frustrated if you couldn't get a passage right on the violin. And finally I would say, well, I think your brain's going to figure it out when you're sleeping, so why don't you put the violin away? Let's see in the morning if it figured it out. And so then he was curious to see if that was true. And so that was another way of his learning. And then sure enough, very often it was a lot easier because he was not stuck in frustration and he was not up against a wall anymore. But also his brain probably did some problem solving while he was sleeping.
It's amazing how much, it's almost like you're challenging your brain to do more and more and more. It's like how we challenge our muscles to lift heavy, heavy, heavy. This is the same thing, just exercising our brain in ways that it otherwise just doesn't get enough of.
That's right. Absolutely. And so when I'm talking to people who are going into medicine, for example, medical students who are in music, or just giving them ideas of why music is so important, we talk about the parallels of what we need as clinicians and what we need as musicians. One of them is to look at a score, you just have raw data. It's just black notes on a page, and it doesn't mean anything unless you know how to interpret that. Similarly, looking at a data set, and then figuring that out and seeing if there are patterns that you're familiar with that you already know how to accomplish. Scales, arpeggios, oh, this part's going to sound like this, oh, this is a repeat of this part. The same with when you see a patient, okay, I'm familiar with these these data sets, and this is going to be how this patient's going to be reacting to that part of it. But also being really open to variations. So it didn't go exactly as you thought it was going to go musically. How are you going to recover without falling out of the music? Similarly with patients, these things make sense, but there's something that's a variation. How are we going to incorporate that? And being able to improvise also to a certain extent while staying within the rules. Those things I think we learn in music. Those things we also need as clinicians. But then finally, being able to take it all together and tell the story, tell a narrative. A piece of music, you can play all the notes perfectly, and it can sound like you're playing all the notes perfectly and there's nothing's going on, there's no motion. Or you can get the meaning of the piece and just put your heart and soul in it. Some of the notes fall out, but everybody's touched. What is that? That's the art of your playing. And that's the same in the art of medicine. You know, you can have all the data. You can say you have this disease, without any heart and soul of like, what does this mean to this family? What does this mean to these, to this child at this moment? And how am I going to help them through from here to beyond? And that's the narrative that you want to really hold on to, but also keep with you as you watch them grow up.
That's so true. I never thought of the last part. I mean, you always think about like the sensory experience and how that links together, the problem-solving experiences and how those make sense. But I never really thought beyond, like the emotional aspect of both of these arts almost come together. And it's with any art, it's perhaps with any field. I guess we're talking more about it from the clinician's perspective because we're both in that field. But I think this applies to anybody in any field, right? How do you bring a human touch into the work we do? And I guess for kids who are going to grow up now with AI and how good AI is going to become in doing human-like jobs, I think the only thing which is going to separate a human from an AI is how much of heart and emotion can they bring into the work they do. Just as like maybe in your experience, maybe something that you've seen work for parents, what would you say are some songs perhaps or some tunes perhaps which parents of newborns should use for their kids? Maybe some like nursery rhyme that you found works for kids.
Well, I think I'm surprised though that kids do like music that sort of comes back to the beginning, you know. So you start with the tune and then it comes back to that same familiar tune because they learn it that way. They learn the different tunes. If there are different songs that parents particularly like, again, because of the kids will pick up on the emotion of like this song my mom really likes. So I don't know if I could say that they're particular pieces of music. But the opposite was true. I thought that children only learned nursery rhymes and didn't understand other things. With my own children, one thing I would recommend to parents is don't just play talk radio on the car. Because children listen. They're sitting there in their car seats listening to everything. So you can play them music. But what I learned from my kids is I would start playing something like a symphony, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's how it goes. And then I'd change the station, and my kids would say, wait, it's not done. So they surprised me that they were listening to the music in a different way, and that they're hearing the story. But nursery rhymes are, universal for a reason. Lullabies are universal for a reason. So those common songs, I think, are part of the common language of our culture. So that's already an argument for playing those songs. And they do learn certain kinds of rhythms and certain kinds of harmonies because all the songs sort of share those.
Yeah. And for kids who are growing up in multilingual environments, how can music be used as a tool to teach more than one language?
I think so. We all learn our languages better when there is song. And part of it's evolutionary. When we communicate with newborns, we say, hello, hello. Yeah. We're basically singing there. And because as the child is learning their sound environment, I think they're listening to the range of, they may not know what the words mean, but they do know what an angry sounding voice is, or a soothing kind of voice, and the contours of what we're communicating. I think they're picking up on that. And so, of course, in English, when you're learning the alphabet, even if you're saying A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, the tune is going on in our heads.
Yeah.
It linked. And so in our subconscious, we are hearing that song because we heard it. I do remember that I learned my multiplication tables with a record that my mom had. It was mainly rhythm. There was not much tune, but I could recite them now still because it's entrained again. The words and the rhythms are a better memory link than just a single one. So I would assume that if we're learning multiple languages, we'd learn the words and the songs together as well.
Yeah, you're so correct, because you never just say the alphabet like very as a monotone. You always just sing it out.
Yeah.
No matter if you're 5 or you're 50. When you say the alphabet, there is a tune that you pick up. Perhaps there's a tune that you were given when you were in like nursery and they were teaching you how to say the alphabet.
Yeah, because it's words plus melody plus fun usually, or community. You're learning it with your classmates. All of those things, as many touch points that can link into our memories, the more those things are kept forever. So, going to the other end of the age spectrum, later, people with dementia and Alzheimer's, the childhood memories and the childhood songs are the ones that they remember, even if they've lost their own language and ability to generate new memories. If you play music, particularly of their late teen years, when they were most intensely emotional, and their preschool years, those songs come back, and it's quite remarkable when that happens. And it's really just very moving.
Yeah. That's amazing. You spoke about this a little bit, but I wanted to dig deeper, which was about community, and how community is such an important part of any art, and especially of music. Mm-hmm. What do we know about the link between community, music, and kids? How did they all come together?
Well, I think, this preceded even Western schooling and all of those things. I think every culture has song, and every culture comes together in song for celebratory moments like weddings, for sad moments like funerals, for military moments when people are marching together. In the fields, people sing, and for comfort, they will sing together. And I'm not as familiar with this, with the research, but there is some about looking at brainwaves that start to align when you have people who are singing together. And there are many, many stories of communities that come together to sing, and also feeling solidarity when they sing. So knowing all of that, teaching singing, we generally will teach singing to kids in preschools, and somehow all of that activity sort of starts to dissipate and specialize as the kids get older. The same with making art. If you ask a 6-year-old if they're an artist, almost all of them will say yes. Yeah. But by the time they get to 10th grade, they're like, oh no, somebody else I know is a really good artist, but I'm not good at it. And so they stop. And so closing off all of those opportunities for seeking and making beauty, I think, is a disservice to people.
Yeah.
So there's a school here in Boston called the Conservatory Lab Charter School, and the children from kindergarten through 8th grade play their instruments every single day. It's a public school, and they're children who are chosen from the greater Boston community through lottery. So they're not chosen on their basis of talent or being able to afford it. They're just given the instruments. They're allowed to choose their instruments, but they learn that the music is just another way of expressing themselves. So they are in orchestras and bands. But they had a beautiful project this recently where some of the children asked their parents, many of whom are immigrants, what their immigrant story was. And from that, they recorded that story and then other children wrote music in response to that story.
Oh, wow.
And then the ensemble played those compositions. So it was many layers of really just incorporating and understanding each other's community through different ways of expression.
That's so beautiful, and what an amazing idea as well.
And we went, the children did it as show and tell. So one evening, we were there and they were explaining it to us. And so then they also had to articulate it, but it was just so moving.
Absolutely. When we talk about kids and how they struggle with emotional regulation, tantrums, all of that, it seems as though two things are so important to help them manage their emotions. One is sport, and the second one is the arts, and especially something which is more tactile, like music or painting, drawing, coloring, all of that, because there's some kind of sensory input to ground you, and with sport, of course, there's so much movement involved.
Yep. Absolutely. I think it's a gift to every child to teach them arts as a way of expressing themselves. I think it's not a service to children to expect that they sit in a classroom for 8 hours just doing math and reading, because there are some children who are either not at that point as far as being able to express themselves through words, or they have a different way of learning and they have dyslexia or something like that. If they're given another way of trying to figure out the world, express the world, it helps them emotionally, because sometimes they're just reacting with, I can't, this is not the doorway that I need to go through. But very often we'll find that they're fabulous artists, or wonderful on the field, or whatever. So giving them as many opportunities is the best way to help them learn to cope.
I couldn't agree more. Even when we talk about autism, for example, when they have a difficulty in expressing and talking, but they don't sometimes have a difficulty in singing, they can do that very easily. We don't know why that is, but they can do it a lot better. So why not give them that tool?
Exactly. And also, when you're learning a musical instrument, you're learning to channel or understand emotions very often. I remember when I was having piano lessons, my piano teacher would say, okay, well, that's good, but can you make it sound funnier? Or can you make that sound happy? And then it wasn't until much later, or can you make this sound angry? I had to translate what an emotion was into how my fingers were going to express it through a mechanical instrument. Those are not things that, when you think about it far, far away, that makes no sense at all. But when you think of it as, well, he's playing emotionally on the piano, it just seems like you're supposed to know that. But children are taught, how do you express yourself in a way that's not yelling or throwing something across the room? But you can express it in a way that somebody understands it, because your piano music sounds angry or whatever. And then the other thing is empathy. When you learn what the composer wanted, so this composer was sad here, can you make it sound like this composer? So that's many layers of expressing emotion through your playing, but also then empathizing with the person who created it and getting your head into the mind of the person who created it. So those are all kinds of things that they can practice when they're young, or even when we're old, if we learn instruments at an older age. But those, again, can translate to practice in medicine.
That's incredible. It truly is. I think as a pediatrician, just as someone who's in science, I do understand that music is important, it can teach you a lot. But I've never thought about these small nuances which you are talking about, how it can help someone communicate their story, communicate the emotions of someone else, teach them empathy, teach them to be one with who they're around, to almost immerse themselves in that process of just the practice of trying to get better.
There's another part of it when you're learning silence. So when we play music, sometimes the most profound part of the music is the rests. So the silence between the notes sometimes is the most profound, and even the microsecond more of silence before you play again is where the tears come or the laughter comes. But that has to be really sort of thought out or, consciously sort of thinking about where those silences will be and how profound they are. And I find that having become much more aware of that over time, when I'm speaking to patients, and also when I'm facilitating a conference, I find that usually I'm impatient about leaving that silence there because it feels awkward. But when you wait for that silence a little longer, usually the most profound reflection comes from there. Or that insight that the teenager had that's bothering them, it was always on the tip of their tongue, but you just talked right into the next thing that they're going to say. But to sit back and be comfortable with that silence, that's something I had to learn from music. And that discipline of just waiting for that moment to let them find their expression.
It's amazing. Circling back to what we started off with, if you have a parent who tells you, oh, I'm not good at singing, I'm not good at playing like the piano, how would you tell them to foster a love for the arts in their child? Because they don't have it. So there is no like role modeling here.
It is a challenge. That is a challenge. But I think everybody listens to music. Almost everyone hears music. And so that is already, just encouraging them not to give that up. Of course, as pediatricians, we have a wonderful advantage that we see our families so often. I think in adult medicine, they may not see their patients as often, but we see them as they grow. And each time we see them for their regular healthy physicals, they're completely different people. A 2-month-old and an 8-month-old or a 9-month-old, they're totally different. And so you can start adding more pieces of information or reminding, like, oh, did you notice that he really likes these colors? And or when you played this piece of music, did you dance with him? Or just different little hints of things. I do encourage, especially my, interestingly, the early readers. I know that they're going to be disruptive usually in kindergarten because they're not challenged enough. Because they're waiting for their colleagues to learn, the other kids to learn the A's and the alphabet, So sometimes the parents will be, well, what do we do? And they will have some things that they can do in the classroom, but I suggest that they start music then. And we also know that starting music before the age of 7, your brain changes the most.
Okay.
But if they have a challenge like learning the piano, they often will calm down because they have found something that you can never win the challenge of playing the piano. There's always another piece of music. There's always another way of playing it. There's always, and so usually I will ask them to see if they can start music. It's a little trickier now because there are so many other challenges for their time. Especially if they're sports people. There are families that have found a way to balance their sports and their music, and I think that's great. That's the best.
Amazing.
That would be the ideal. But sometimes the sports really sort of takes up most of their afternoons and their Saturdays and their Sundays, and so it's a challenge to be able to balance all of those things. The other thing that we do is advocate for music in the schools, so that gives it's more equitable that more kids will get an opportunity to engage in the arts, even if their parents don't have the resources to do that. So the Boston Public Schools now has, there's something called the Arts Expansion Initiative, starting about 10 years back, and only about 50% of elementary school kids were getting even an hour of an art form in school. I mean, it hadn't been that way, and then with all the budget cuts, and then it came back. But through advocacy and the donations of family foundations and a wonderful organization that's pulled it all together, now almost all the kids in the Boston public school system get at least 1 hour, but most get 2 hours of arts per week. Not necessarily music, but one of the art forms, and so they have an opportunity for expression. And as I said, then there's places like Conservatory Lab Charter School where the kids get get a lot more of that too.
It's funny that when I was a child, the arts or sport were always considered a distraction from academics. But now that so much research has been done into understanding it, and from a lot of people like yourself who are true advocates about bringing it to kids, we realize that it's not actually a distraction. If anything, it's like a propeller for their academic success also.
Exactly.
When we look at like kids who come to Harvard College, for example, they're all really good at sport, most of them at least. Most of them also play instruments. I mean, I'm not using statistics here, but this is just like a kind of an overall hunch almost. But it's true, and it's because it served as a propeller for them. It served as a fuel along with their academic successes.
It gives you other ways of learning how to be attentive, mindful, the discipline that you mentioned. And it's not just in one domain, not just the academic domain, but in other ways. Usually when I give talks, and mainly I speak at medical schools, I ask how many of my audience played music as children, and it's almost every time it's almost everybody. Many of them have sort of sad or guilty looks on their face that they gave it up when they went to medical school or when they went, got busy. But I just encourage them to go back to it. And very often people will come back and say, I went back to the piano, and it was, they're so grateful to find the music again, or for the first time of something that they had always wanted to do, but they thought that they had to put it aside, because it does touch a different part of our souls.
If you had to give a parent perhaps 3 pieces of advice at the intersection of child development and music, to close off the podcast, what would those 3 little pieces of advice be?
Find opportunities to share and enjoy music with your child. When you're doing that, when you're playing music or when you're sharing music, give them all your attention. And if there's an instrument that you wanted to learn or you want them to learn, maybe think about learning it together.
I love the last one. That's a really, really powerful one. And you said that it's more beneficial if it's done before 7. So
yes.
That's another little point to flag. Thank you so much, Dr. Wong. I think the work that you've done at the intersection of pediatrics and music is so amazing. It's truly incredible. And somehow, just in the conversation we've had, my brain is it makes so much sense. And I never thought about it in this way. I knew that there is a connection, but not so much of one. So thank you so much for your time. This was amazing.
You're very welcome. And this field has really been skyrocketing for the last 10 to 20 years. There are people in neuroscience and people in music therapy and people in music education, and they're all really coalescing together, and the conversations are really growing. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of From Birth to Bloom. We'll be back next week with another special guest.